I returned a ghost to my own home on Christmas Eve, only to find my life had been stolen. Standing in the shadows of the driveway with the Chicago wind biting at my face, I watched my wife Beatrice crying silently on the second-floor balcony, locked out in the freezing cold, while inside my son laughed and toasted with his in-laws. They were drinking my vintage wine sitting on my furniture and celebrating a future that relied entirely on my death. I did not knock on the door. I did not scream. Instead, I walked around to the breaker box and prepared to turn their warm celebration into a freezing nightmare. Before I tell you how I evicted them, with nothing but a breaker switch and a shotgun cleaning kit, please tell me where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to remind ungrateful family members exactly who holds the keys to the castle. My name is Conrad Wolf, and at 71 years old, I thought I had earned the right to a quiet retirement. I made my fortune in commercial real estate fighting tooth and nail for every square foot of downtown Chicago. I was known as the Iron Wolf not because I was cruel, but because I was unmovable. I raised my son Brandon to be strong, or so I thought, but somewhere along the line he mistook my generosity for weakness. 3 weeks ago, I told my family I was going on a fishing trip to Canada. It was a lie. I was actually checking into the Cleveland Clinic for a heart procedure I did not want them to worry about. I wanted to protect them. I came home 3 days early, hoping to surprise them for the holidays. The surprise was mine. I pulled my rental car up to the curb a block away so the headlights would not alert them. Walking up the driveway, the first thing I noticed was the disrespect. A gaudy leased Mercedes and a rusted pickup truck were parked diagonally, blocking access to my garage. I recognized the truck. It belonged to Ted Pearson, my son's father-in-law, a man who had declared bankruptcy more times than he had paid taxes. The house was blazing with light. Music thumped through the insulated walls, a heavy bass rhythm that rattled the frost on the windows. I stepped off the pavement and moved through the landscaping, avoiding the motion sensor lights I had installed myself. I knew the blind spots. I was the one who designed the security perimeter. I looked up. There, on the master bedroom balcony, stood Beatrice. She was wearing a thin cardigan over her nightgown, hugging herself against the 20-degree weather. She was not looking at the view. She was looking through the glass doors into the bedroom, watching someone else inside. She was crying. Her tears were not the hysterical kind, but the slow, silent tears of a woman who has been broken by 1,000 small cuts. My blood ran cold. Beatrice was the gentlest soul I knew, the only person who could soften my edges. Seeing her locked out of her own sanctuary triggered a rage I had not felt since my days in the boardroom facing down hostile takeovers. I did not rush in. Only fools rush in. I needed intel. I walked quietly to the side of the house where the recycling bins were lined up. They were overflowing. I lifted the lid of the first bin, and the smell of expensive alcohol hit me. I used the flashlight on my phone, shielding the beam with my hand. There they were. 4 empty bottles of Chateau Margaux, 1996. My private collection. Bottles I had been saving for my 50th wedding anniversary. They had popped them open like cheap soda. Next to them were shattered pieces of porcelain. I recognized the pattern. It was Beatrice's mother's tea set, hand-painted in England, a family heirloom she kept in a glass display case. They had treated it like garbage. I moved to the garage side door. It was locked, but I had the keypad code. I punched it in. The door slid open silently. The garage was a disaster. My workbench, my sanctuary of order, was piled high with boxes labeled estate sale. My tools were gone. My vintage clocks, which I repaired as a hobby, were missing from their shelves. They were selling my things. I was not even dead yet, and they were liquidating my life. I crept toward the door that led from the garage to the kitchen. It was slightly ajar. I could hear voices clearly now. "It is a good thing the old man is gone for another 3 days," Ted Pearson's voice boomed. He sounded drunk. This wine is fantastic. You know, Brandon, once Conrad kicks the bucket, this place is going to fetch a pretty penny. You should sell it immediately. The market is hot. I held my breath, waiting for my son to defend me, to defend his home. Yeah, I know, Brandon's voice was slurred. He is losing it anyway, Ted. He forgets things. Last week he forgot where he put his glasses. It is only a matter of time before we have to put him in a home. Monica says it is for the best. Then we can really start living. Monica, my daughter-in-law, the architect of this misery. He is not just losing it, Monica's sharp voice cut in. He is a danger to himself. Keeping Beatrice down in the basement guest room is actually a kindness. She cannot take care of him and he cannot take care of her. We are doing them a favor by taking over. Plus, my parents needed a place to stay while their condo gets fumigated. It just makes sense. They had moved my wife into the basement. They had moved the Pearsons into my master suite. They were drinking my wine and planning my incarceration in a nursing home. The rage in my chest settled into a cold, hard stone. I backed away from the door. I could have burst in there shouting. I could have thrown a punch. But that is what an emotional man does. I am a tactical man. They wanted to play games with ownership. They wanted to act like this was their house. Fine. I would let them see how the house treated intruders. I walked around the back of the house to the external access door for the utility room. It was hidden behind a trellis of dormant ivy. I unlocked it and slipped into the hum of the house's mechanical heart. The furnace was roaring, pumping heat to the main floor, keeping the party guests warm. The water heater was working overtime. I took out my pocket knife. I did not cut wires that would be dangerous and illegal. Instead, I went to the smart home hub mounted on the wall. I disconnected the main control panel from the internet, preventing anyone inside from adjusting the settings via their phones. Then I manually overrode the zone controls. Zone 1. The main floor where the party was raging, I set the temperature to 45 degrees. Zone 2, the basement where they had banished my wife, I set to a comfortable 72. Zone 3, the master bedroom. I left it alone for now because I needed to get Beatrice in there. Next, I went to the breaker box. I identified the circuits for the kitchen appliances, the living room outlets, and the entertainment system. Click, click, click. The thumping bass music upstairs died instantly. What the hell, someone shouted from above. I smiled in the darkness. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Beatrice. I prayed she had her phone with her. Open the balcony door. Do not make a sound. I am coming up. I waited. 1 minute, 2 minutes. Then 3 dots appeared. Conrad, it is me. Open the door. I left the utility room, locking it behind me, and climbed the trellis on the north side of the house. I was 71, but I kept myself fit, and the rage gave me strength I did not know I had. I pulled myself over the railing of the balcony. Beatrice was there, shivering violently, her face pale in the moonlight. When she saw me, she collapsed into my arms, not sobbing, but shaking with relief. Shh, I whispered, holding her tight against my chest. I am here. Conrad, she whispered, her teeth chattering. They locked the door from the inside. Monica said I was depressing the guests. She said I needed fresh air. She locked you out. I repeated, my voice a low growl. She has the key, Beatrice said. They have been in there all night going through your jewelry box. Ted and Judy are sleeping in our bed, Conrad. They said it was just for a few days, but they brought all their luggage. We are taking it back, I said. I used my elbow to smash the glass pane of the French door. The sound was swallowed by the wind and the confusion downstairs. I reached in, turned the lock, and opened the door. The room smelled of stale perfume and strangers' sweat. Their suitcases were open on the floor, our bed unmade and piled with their clothes. I felt a wave of nausea but pushed it down. Get in the bed, I told Beatrice. Under the covers. Warm up. But they will come back, she said, terrified. Let them come, I said. I dragged a heavy oak dresser in front of the bedroom door, barricading us in. Then I went into the ensuite bathroom and filled the tub with hot water. I soaked towels and brought them to Beatrice, wrapping her freezing feet. Downstairs, the chaos was escalating. The power is out, Brandon yelled. Just the outlets. The lights are flickering. Check the breaker box, Ted shouted. I can't. The door to the utility room is locked, Brandon replied, panic rising in his voice. The code is not working. Dad must have changed it. It is getting freezing in here, Judy complained. Why is the heat off? I sat in the armchair by the window, my shotgun cleaning kit on the lap. I assembled the Remington 870, not to use it, but because the sound of a slide action racking is a universal language. I did not load it. I did not need bullets. I needed fear. I listened as the temperature in the house dropped. Chicago winters are merciless. Without heat, a large house like this loses warmth rapidly. Within an hour, I heard them scrambling for coats. We can't stay here, Judy whined. It is like an icebox. We can sleep in the master bedroom, Monica said. It is on a separate zone. It should still be warm. Mom, Dad, come on. We will kick Beatrice out if she is in there. I heard their footsteps on the stairs. Heavy, entitled footsteps. They reached the door. The handle jiggled. Locked, Monica hissed. Open this door. Beatrice, I know you are in there. She pounded on the wood. Beatrice looked at me, fear in her eyes. I put a finger to my lips. Open it, or I will break it down, Ted threatened. I stood up. I walked to the door and leaned close to the wood. Try it, Ted. I said, my voice calm and deep. And see what happens. Silence. Absolute heavy silence on the other side of the door. Dad Brandon's voice cracked. You're home, go downstairs, I said. Wrap yourselves in the curtains. Huddle together for warmth. Because nobody is entering this room tonight. And if you try to leave with a single item that belongs to me, I will call the police and report a robbery in progress. But it's freezing, Monica screamed. You can't do this. We have rights. You have the right to remain silent, I said. Now get away from my door. I heard them retreat, muttering, cursing, shivering. I went back to Beatrice. She was finally starting to get warm. Sleep, my love, I said, kissing her forehead. Tomorrow we clean house. I did not sleep. I sat in the chair watching the door, listening to the wind howl outside and the teeth chatter downstairs. I waited for the sun. Morning came with a gray, brutal light. The house was silent. The cold had settled into the bones of the building. I unlocked the bedroom door and moved the dresser. I told Beatrice to stay put. I walked downstairs. The living room was a wreck of empty bottles and food scraps. Huddled on the sofas wrapped in my expensive Persian rugs were my son, his wife, and her parents. They looked miserable. Their breath was visible in the air. I walked into the kitchen. I turned the stove on not for heat, but to boil water. I made myself a single cup of black coffee. The smell of the rich roast wafted through the freezing air, waking them up. I sat at the head of the dining table, the shotgun laid across my lap, along with a rag and oil. I began to slowly, methodically clean the barrel. Ted was the first to sit up. He looked terrible, his face puffy from the wine, his eyes red. You crazy old lunatic, he rasped, pulling the rug tighter around him. You could have killed us with hypothermia. I am going to sue you. Good morning, Ted, I said, taking a sip of coffee. I see you enjoyed the wine. That bottle you drank cost $600. I will be adding it to your tab. Brandon stood up, shivering violently. Dad put the gun away. You are scaring everyone. This is insane. We were just having a family gathering. A family gathering where your mother was locked on the balcony. I asked, not raising my voice. A gathering where you discussed putting me in a nursing home to sell my property. Brandon's face went pale. You heard that. I hear everything, Brandon. I see everything. Monica stood up, her eyes flashing with a venomous defiance. She walked toward the table. You are senile, old man. You are paranoid. We never said that. You are imagining things. This violent behavior proves you are unfit to live here alone. We are going to call social services. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a stack of Polaroids I had taken from the garage before coming upstairs. I tossed them onto the table. They fanned out, revealing Monica meeting with the pawnshop owner, handing over my antique pocket watches. Is this my imagination? Monica, I asked. Is the $3,000 cash you took for a watch worth $20,000 also? My imagination, Monica froze. The color drained from her face. You are selling my property, I said. That is theft. That is a felony. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. Here is how this is going to go. You have exactly 60 minutes to pack your personal belongings. Not my rugs, not my silver, your clothes. And then you are going to get out of my house. Where are we supposed to go? Judy screeched. Our condo is being fumigated, not my problem, I said. Brandon stepped forward, trying to summon some authority. You can't kick them out, Dad. This is my house, too. I am your son. I am in the will. I looked at my son, really looked at him. I saw a man of 38 who still thought like a child of 10. The will is a document that distributes my assets after I die, I said. I checked my pulse this morning, Brandon. I am still very much alive. This is my house. My name is on the deed. Yours is not. Ted stood up, puffing out his chest, trying to intimidate me. Listen here, Wolf. You can't treat us like this. Beatrice needs us. You are neglecting her. If you kick us out, we will file a report for elder abuse against you. We will say you trapped us here and threatened us with a gun. I checked my watch. You have 55 minutes, I said. And Ted, if you are still here at the 61st minute, I am not calling the police to report trespassing. I am calling the IRS to discuss that offshore account you think they don't know about. Ted's eyes bulged. How do you... I know a lot of things, Ted. I know about the gambling debts. I know about the second mortgage on your condo, which isn't being fumigated. It was foreclosed on last week, wasn't it? Silence. The room was so quiet you could hear the refrigerator hum. Get packing, I said. They scrambled. It was a pathetic sight. They shoved clothes into bags, arguing in whispers. Monica tried to sneak a silver candelabra into her purse. Put it back, I said without looking up from my coffee. She dropped it on the sofa with a clang. While they packed, I called my lawyer Sullivan. Sullivan, I said, I need a restraining order, immediate effect. I have video footage from the internal security cameras of Monica verbally assaulting Beatrice and physically pushing her out to the balcony. Yes, the cloud backup worked perfectly. Bring the papers, and bring a locksmith. We are changing everything. 45 minutes later, the house was empty of pests. The silence was beautiful. But I knew this was just the first skirmish. As I watched Brandon's car peel out of the driveway, followed by Ted's rusted truck, I knew they were not going to disappear. Desperate people do desperate things, and I had just backed them into a corner. I went to the bank an hour later, leaving Beatrice safe with the new locksmith. I needed to assess the damage. I sat in the office of the branch manager, a woman I had known for 20 years. Conrad, she said, looking uncomfortable. I tried to call you last week, but your son said you were in the wilderness with no signal. What did he do, Sarah? I asked. He authorized a home equity line of credit against your commercial warehouse property, she said, sliding a document across the desk. $200,000. He had a power of attorney document with your signature. I looked at the signature. It was a good forgery. But it was a forgery. Where did the money go? I asked. It was wired immediately to a corporate account, she said. T&J Enterprises. Ted and Judy. My son had stolen $200,000 of my equity to pay off his father-in-law's gambling debts. He wasn't just a weak man manipulated by his wife. He was an active participant. He was a criminal. I felt a crack in my heart, a deep, painful fracture. I had raised him. I had paid for his college. I had bailed him out of bad investments, and this was his repayment. Freeze it, I said. I can't freeze the transferred funds. Conrad. They are gone, Sarah said gently, but I can flag the account for fraud. However, if you claim fraud, you know the bank will have to pursue criminal charges against whoever signed it. She looked at me, knowing exactly what that meant. It meant sending my son to prison. I looked at the forged signature. I thought of Beatrice shivering on the balcony. I thought of the empty wine bottles. Do it, I said. File the report. I walked out of the bank into the cold winter air. The battle lines were drawn. They wanted my money. They wanted my life. They were about to find out that the Iron Wolf had not lost his teeth. I drove home, but I did not go inside immediately. I sat in the car watching the house. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from my home security system. Motion detected at the front door. I checked the camera feed on my phone. It wasn't Brandon. It wasn't Monica. It was a police officer and a woman with a clipboard, a social worker. And standing behind them, looking smug, was Monica holding a piece of paper. They hadn't wasted any time. They were playing the dementia card. They were coming for my freedom. I put the car in gear and drove up the driveway. Let them come. I had a few surprises left in my arsenal. I stepped out of the car, my face a mask of calm. Can I help you, officers? I asked. Mr. Wolf, the officer asked, hand resting near his belt. We received a call about a disturbance and a report regarding the welfare of Mrs. Wolf. We have an emergency petition here for temporary guardianship filed by your son, Brandon Wolf. I looked at Monica. She smiled a small, cruel smile. He is confused, officer, she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. He threatened us with a gun this morning. He doesn't know what he is doing. We just want to make sure Mom is safe. I looked at the social worker. Would you like to come in? I asked. I have some home movies I think you should see. I led them into the living room. The heat was back on, but the house still felt cold. Beatrice came down the stairs. She looked stronger now, fed and rested. Beatrice, to tell them, Monica said, stepping forward. Tell them how he locked you in the room. Tell them how scared you are. Beatrice looked at Monica. Then she looked at me. She walked over and took my hand. I am scared, she said clearly. I am scared of my daughter-in-law, who locked me on a balcony in freezing temperatures because I asked her not to sell my husband's watch. Monica's jaw dropped. You liar! I walked to the TV and connected my phone. I installed cameras 3 months ago, I said. Internal ones with audio. I didn't tell anyone. Not even Beatrice. I wanted to see why my wife was losing weight. Why she seemed so unhappy. I pressed play. The video showed the living room 2 days ago. Monica was screaming at Beatrice. Shut up, you useless old hag. Sign the check, or I will stop buying your heart medication. No one cares about you. Brandon can't wait for you to die. The social worker gasped. The police officer shifted his stance, turning his attention to Monica. That's... Monica stammered. That's a deepfake. He made it. The officer looked at me. Mr. Wolf, do you wish to press charges for elder abuse? I looked at Monica. Her arrogance was gone, replaced by the terror of a trapped animal. Not yet, I said. Why, the officer asked, confused. Because I want them all, I said. This is just the pawn. I want the whole board. I turned to Monica. Get out of my house. Tell Brandon to enjoy the $200,000. He is going to need it for a good lawyer. She ran, but I knew it wasn't over. A rat is most dangerous when it is cornered, and I had just cornered the whole nest. The real war was just beginning. The silence that descended on the house after the Pearsons' departure was not peaceful. It was heavy and suffocating like the air before a tornado touches down. Ted and Judy had left skid marks on the driveway in their haste to escape my ultimatum, but Brandon and Monica remained. They retreated to the guest suite on the second floor, slamming the door with a finality that echoed through the house. They did not leave because they knew that possession was 9/10 of the law. As long as they occupied a room, they had rights, or so they thought. I spent the morning comforting Beatrice. She was shaken not just by the cold of the balcony, but by the shattered illusion of her family. She sat in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea, staring at the empty spot where her mother's tea set used to be. I went to check the router in the hallway closet, intending to restore full internet access now that the intruders were gone. The closet door was open. The fiber optic cables had been slashed, not unplugged, but cut with scissors. The modem was missing entirely. I walked into the kitchen. Beatrice looked up at me, her eyes wide with a new panic. "Conrad," she whispered. "My pills. They are gone." I felt the blood in my veins turn to ice. Beatrice took beta blockers for a heart arrhythmia. Missing a dose would not kill her instantly, but the stress of the last 24 hours, combined with withdrawals, could trigger a cardiac event. I checked the cabinet where we kept the medication. Empty. I checked the drawers. Nothing. I walked to the foot of the stairs and looked up at the closed door of the guest suite. This was not a tantrum. This was a siege. They were trying to stress us out to force a medical emergency that would remove us from the house and leave them in charge. It was a tactic I had seen in hostile corporate takeovers where utilities are cut to force a building owner to sell. But this was my wife. This was my life. I did not go upstairs to beg. That is what they wanted. They wanted me to pound on the door and plead for the medicine so they could record me shouting and use it as evidence of my instability. Instead, I went to the garage. In the back of my tool chest inside a false bottom drawer, I kept an emergency supply of all our essential medications. I learned a long time ago that you never rely on a single supply chain. I brought the bottle back to the kitchen and gave Beatrice her dose. "I told you to always be prepared," I said softly. She swallowed the pill, her hands trembling. "Why are they doing this, Conrad? He is our son." "He is not our son right now, Beatrice," I replied. "He is a hostage to his own greed and his wife's ambition. And we are no longer parents. We are targets." I called my locksmith. Not the local guy everyone used, but a specialist I used for my commercial buildings. A man who installed vaults, not just front doors. He arrived 40 minutes later, a silent giant of a man carrying a bag of tools that looked more like surgical instruments. "I want every lock changed," I told him. "Exterior and interior." "Interior too?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Especially the interior," I said. While he worked, I sat in the living room and watched the stairs. Around noon, Monica emerged. She was wearing a silk robe, walking with the arrogance of a woman who believes she holds the winning hand. She went to the thermostat and tapped the screen aggressively. Then she pulled out her phone and frowned. "The Wi-Fi is down," she announced, not looking at me. "And the heat is acting up again. You really need to get this house maintenance checked, Conrad. It is falling apart, just like its owners." She walked into the kitchen and opened the pantry. She froze. The pantry was locked. She pulled on the handle. It didn't budge. It was a solid oak door, and the new deadbolt my specialist had just installed was commercial grade. "What is this?" she snapped, turning to me. "Why is the pantry locked?" I turned a page of my newspaper. "Inventory control," I said without looking up. "I noticed some expensive items went missing recently. Bottles of wine, silverware. I am securing my assets." She huffed and went to the refrigerator. She grabbed a pitcher of filtered water and poured a glass. Then she opened the cabinet for the coffee. Locked. Every cabinet containing food of value was secured. "This is childish," she screamed. "You are starving us." "You have a car, Monica," I said calmly. "There is a grocery store 3 miles away. You have your own money, do you not?" "Oh, wait. I forgot." I cut off the transfers. "I suppose you will have to use whatever cash you got from selling my pocket watches." She slammed the glass down on the counter, shattering it. "You are going to regret this, Conrad," she hissed. "You think you are strong, but you are just a sad old man. We are not leaving. We have tenant rights. You cannot kick us out without a 30-day notice." I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. "I am not kicking you out, Monica. You are welcome to stay in the guest room. But this house is not a hotel. It is a facility. And your access clearance has been revoked." She stormed back upstairs. I heard her yelling at Brandon. By 3 in the afternoon, the locksmith was finished. The house had been transformed. The master suite was now a fortress accessible only by a biometric fingerprint scanner. The study where I kept my files and the safe was secured with a keypad code known only to me. The basement door was reinforced. The only common areas left open were the living room, the guest bathroom, and the hallways. I sat in my study watching the security feeds on my private monitor. I saw Brandon come out of the room. He looked disheveled. He walked to the router closet and saw the cut cables. He slumped against the wall, his face in his hands. He was beginning to realize the reality of his situation. He was trapped in a house that was actively rejecting him. He had no internet to distract him, no food unless he went out and bought it, and no access to the money he needed to buy it. But the Cold War was just beginning. At 5 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I checked the camera. A delivery driver stood there with 4 large pizzas. Brandon ran down the stairs to answer it. He opened the door, the smell of pepperoni wafting in. "That will be $85, the driver said. Brandon patted his pockets. He pulled out his wallet and swiped a credit card. "Declined," the driver said after a moment. "Try this one," Brandon said, his voice tight. "Declined." Brandon looked back at me standing in the doorway of the study. "Dad," he pleaded. "Come on. We are hungry. Just pay for the pizza." I looked at him. I saw the boy I had taught to ride a bike. I saw the young man I had sent to college. And I saw the thief who had forged my signature to steal my equity. "I am not hungry," I said. I closed the study door and locked it. From the hallway, I heard the humiliation in his voice as he told the driver to take the food back. I heard Monica screaming at him, calling him useless. I sat at my desk and opened the file Sullivan had sent me. It was a background check on Ted Pearson. If I was going to win this war, I needed to know exactly who I was fighting. The report was thick: tax liens, lawsuits, and something else. A connection to a loan shark operation in the South Side. Ted didn't just owe money to banks. He owed money to people who broke legs. That explained the desperation. That explained why Brandon had stolen the $200,000. He wasn't just funding a lifestyle. He was paying blood money to keep his father-in-law breathing. My son had risked my financial security and his mother's safety to save a man who saw him as nothing more than a wallet. The realization hit me with a fresh wave of grief. But grief is a luxury I could not afford. Not yet. I heard a scratching sound at the study door. I looked at the monitor. Monica was there. She was holding a bobby pin trying to pick the lock. I watched her for a moment. Her face was twisted in concentration and rage. She wasn't trying to get in to talk. She wanted the documents. She knew I had the evidence of the forgery. I picked up the phone and dialed the landline extension for the guest room. The phone in their room rang loudly. Monica jumped, dropping the pin. She ran back upstairs to answer it, thinking it might be her parents. I waited until she picked up. "Hello," she said, breathless. "This is security," I said, my voice flat. "We have detected an attempted breach at the East Wing study. The police have been notified of an intruder." I hung up. Upstairs, I heard the phone slam into the receiver. I did not call the police. Not yet. The psychological pressure was more effective than a siren. I wanted them to feel watched. I wanted them to feel the walls closing in. Night fell. The house was dark. I had put timers on the lights so they would turn off at random intervals, leaving the hallways in pitch blackness before flickering back on. Beatrice was asleep in the master bedroom, safe behind the biometric lock. I sat in the dark living room, the shotgun leaned against my chair. I was not just defending my property. I was defending my dignity. Sometime after midnight, I heard a creak on the stairs. It was Brandon. He was moving slowly, trying to be quiet. He wasn't heading for the door. He was heading for the basement. Why the basement? Then I remembered. The wine cellar. The expensive vintage collection. He wasn't looking for a drink. He was looking for something to sell. I let him reach the bottom of the stairs. I let him try the handle of the temperature-controlled cellar. It was locked. He rattled the handle, frustration getting the better of him. He kicked the door. "Damn it," he whispered, harsh and desperate. I turned on the lamp beside me. The light blinded him for a second. He shielded his eyes and looked up. "Dad," he said, his voice trembling. I was just looking for the fuse box. I thought maybe we could fix the internet." "In the wine cellar?" I asked. He looked down at his feet. "How much does Ted owe?" I asked. Brandon's head snapped up. "What? How much does he owe the Sharks?" "Brandon, is it 50,000, 100? Is that why you stole my equity, to stop them from breaking his knees?" Brandon crumbled. He sat on the bottom step and put his head in his hands. "They threatened Monica, Dad. They said if Ted didn't pay, they would come after her. I didn't have a choice." "You always have a choice," I said. "You could have come to me. You could have told me the truth. Instead, you stole from me. You let your wife abuse your mother. You chose them over us." "I was scared, Dad." "You don't understand." "I understand fear, Brandon," I said, standing up. "But fear is no excuse for betrayal." I walked to the stairs and looked down at him. "You are going to sleep in that room upstairs, without food, without internet, and without dignity. And tomorrow you are going to watch as I take apart everything you and your in-laws have built on my back." "I am sorry," he wept. "I am sorry too, son," I said, "but sorry doesn't pay the debt." I turned off the lamp and went upstairs, leaving him in the dark. The house was a fortress now, but the enemy was already inside, and I knew that tomorrow they would stop trying to pick locks and start trying to break down walls. I had to be ready. The morning sun did not bring warmth. It only brought a harsh, illuminating gray light that exposed the cracks in my world. I left Brandon sleeping in the guest room, a prisoner of his own making, and dressed in my charcoal wool suit. It was my armor. Today I was not a father or a husband. I was a forensic accountant of my own betrayal. I drove to the downtown branch of the Sovereign Bank where I had kept my primary accounts for 40 years. The city was waking up, plows scraping the slush from the streets, but inside my car, the silence was absolute. I had an appointment with Sarah Jenkins, the regional manager. She was a woman of steel and numbers, someone I respected, because she never smiled unless a deal was closed. When I walked into her office, she stood up immediately, but she did not offer me coffee. She knew why I was there. I had called her at dawn. "Mr. Wolf," she said, gesturing to the leather chair opposite her desk. "We pulled the files from the archive as you requested. The physical copies." She slid a thick manila folder across the mahogany desk. It looked innocuous. Just paper. But inside that folder was the evidence that would sever the last tether between me and my son. I opened it. The document on top was a deed of trust securing a high-risk commercial loan against my warehouse property on the south side. The amount was exactly $200,000. The date was 3 weeks ago, 2 days after I had supposedly left for my fishing trip. I turned the page to the signature line. There it was. Conrad Wolf. It was a masterpiece of deception. The slant of the W was perfect. The sharp loop of the C was identical to the one I had developed over 50 years of signing contracts. To the naked eye, it was my signature. But I looked closer. I took out my reading glasses and leaned in. There was a tiny, almost microscopic hesitation mark at the top of the F. A small blot of ink where the pen had paused. It was the hesitation of a son realizing he was crossing a line he could never uncross. He practiced, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. He didn't just trace this. He practiced it until he could do it from memory. Sarah nodded, her expression grim. The notary who witnessed this was, let's say he is no longer with the bank. We found irregularities in his logbook. He claimed you were present. Obviously you were in Cleveland. I looked at the disbursement details. The money hadn't gone to Brandon. It hadn't gone to Monica. It had been wired directly to a shell company account in the Cayman Islands. T&J Global Ventures, Ted and Judy. My son had committed a felony forgery worth $250,000 not to save himself, but to feed the insatiable hunger of his father-in-law's gambling addiction. He had sold his soul to buy a temporary reprieve for a man who despised him. This is a Class 1 felony, Sarah said, her hand hovering over the phone. Bank fraud, identity theft, forgery. Mr. Wolf, if we file the SAR, the Suspicious Activity Report, with the federal government, the FBI will be involved. The minimum sentence is mandatory. I looked at the phone. One call. That was all it would take. One call and Brandon would be in handcuffs before lunch. He would be stripped of his freedom, his future, and his name. It would be the end of him, and it would be too easy. Prison would protect him from the loan sharks. Prison would give him 3 meals a day. Prison would make him a victim in his own mind, a martyr who was sacrificed by his cruel father. He wouldn't learn. He would just rot. And Monica. She would play the grieving wife, the innocent bystander, who had no idea her husband was a criminal. She would divorce him, take half of whatever assets he had left, and walk away clean to find another victim. Ted would claim ignorance, saying Brandon offered him the money as a gift. No. I didn't want Brandon in a cell. Not yet. I wanted him to feel the weight of what he had done. I wanted Monica to be exposed as the architect of this ruin. I wanted the Pearsons to bleed every cent they had stolen before the law came for them. Do not call the FBI, I said. Sarah blinked, surprised. Conrad, this is $200,000. The bank cannot just ignore this. We have liability protocols. I will cover the loan, I said. I pulled my checkbook from my jacket pocket. It was heavy in my hand, like a stone. I will write you a personal check for the full amount, plus the early repayment penalty and the interest accrued. As far as the bank's books are concerned, the loan is paid. There is no loss. Therefore, there is no crime against the bank. Sarah stared at me. You are paying off his theft. You are letting him get away with it. I uncapped my fountain pen. The ink was black, permanent. I am not letting him get away with anything, Sarah. I am buying the evidence. I wrote the check. My hand did not shake. My signature, the real one, flowed onto the paper with the force of a judgment. I tore it out and placed it on top of the forged document. I want the original loan papers, I said. I want the notary's affidavit. I want the wire transfer confirmation showing exactly where the money went. I want it all in this folder, and I want it in my hand. Sarah hesitated, then slowly picked up the check. She verified the amount. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and fear. "You are playing a dangerous game, Conrad," she whispered. "If you hold this over him, that is blackmail." "It is not blackmail," I said, standing up and buttoning my jacket. "It is leverage. Blackmail is for money. I don't want money. I want the truth. And I want them to dismantle their own lies one by one." She handed me the folder. It felt heavier than before. It contained the death of my son's innocence and the proof of his treason. "One more thing," I said, pausing at the door. "Brandon has a supplementary credit card on my platinum account, the one he thinks is for emergencies." "Yes," Sarah said. "He maxed it out yesterday. $25,000 at a luxury car dealership, a down payment on a Porsche." Of course he did. He thought he had gotten away with the warehouse loan, so he decided to celebrate. "Cancel it," I said. "But don't just decline the card. Flag it as stolen." "Stolen?" Sarah asked. "But you gave it to him." "I gave it to my son," I replied. "The man using it now is a stranger to me. If he tries to use it again, I want the merchant to cut it in half." I walked out of the bank into the biting wind. The city noise was a dull roar, but my mind was clear. I had the smoking gun. I held the power of life and death over my family's future. I got into my car and placed the folder on the passenger seat. I ran my hand over the leather cover. I could go to the police station right now. I could end this misery. But that would be mercy. And I was fresh out of mercy. I needed to go back to the house. I needed to look Brandon in the eye, knowing what I knew. I needed to watch him squirm as the walls closed in. I needed to wait for Monica to make her next move because I knew she wouldn't stop. She was greedy, and greed makes people stupid. They would try something else. They would try to declare me incompetent. They would try to force a power of attorney. And when they did, I would be ready. I would let them build their trap brick by brick, and then when they stepped inside to bait it, I would slam the door shut with this folder. I started the engine. The heater blasted warm air, but I still felt cold. I drove back toward the suburbs, toward the fortress that used to be a home, carrying the paper blade that would eventually cut my family out of my life forever. The game had changed. It was no longer about defense. It was about total annihilation. I drove straight from the bank to the loop, where the skyscrapers cut the sky like jagged teeth. My destination was the monolith of glass and steel that housed the law offices of Sullivan and Cromwell. But I wasn't going to the main reception. I had a key to the private elevator in the parking garage. Sullivan was not just my attorney. He was the man who knew where the bodies were buried because he had helped me dig the graves for my commercial rivals back in the 80s. He was the only man alive I trusted completely. When the elevator doors slid open, Sullivan was already standing by the window, looking out at the gray expanse of Lake Michigan. He did not turn around when I entered. He held a crystal tumbler of scotch in one hand, and he poured a second one as I approached. He knew me too well. He knew that if I was coming to see him unscheduled in the middle of the week, carrying a manila folder that smelled like betrayal, the situation was nuclear. "Drink," he said, handing me the glass. "You look like you just stared into the abyss, Conrad." "I stared into my son's bank records," I corrected him, taking the glass. "It is the same thing." I sat down in the wingback leather chair that had molded to my shape over decades of crisis management. I placed the folder I had purchased from the bank on his desk. It landed with a heavy thud. Sullivan sat down and opened it. He put on his reading glasses. He scanned the forged deed, the fraudulent loan application, and the check I had written to cover the crime. He was a man who rarely showed emotion, but his jaw tightened. He ran a finger over Brandon's signature, the forgery that was so close to mine. It was heartbreaking. "He crossed the line," Sullivan said quietly. "This isn't just youthful indiscretion, Conrad. This is federal prison time. Why did you buy the debt? Why didn't you let the bank hang him? Because a hanging is too quick, I said, taking a slow burn of the scotch. And because Brandon is just the hand that held the pen. I want the brain that directed it. I want to know where the money went, Sullivan. The bank said T&J Global Ventures. Find out who they are. Find out why my son was desperate enough to commit a felony for them. Sullivan turned to his computer. His fingers flew across the keyboard. He had access to databases that didn't officially exist, credit bureaus, shadow registries, and private investigator networks. While he worked, I looked around the office. It was a temple of law and order. Everything my house currently was not. My house was a chaotic war zone occupied by insurgents. Here there were rules, and I was about to use those rules to crush them. It took him 10 minutes. That was the terrifying efficiency of Sullivan. He spun the monitor around. T&J Global Ventures is a shell company registered in Delaware, he said. The principals are Theodore and Judith Pearson. Ted and Judy, I whispered. My in-laws. But that is just the shell, Sullivan continued, his voice dropping an octave. Look at the transaction history, Conrad. The money didn't stay in the account. It sat there for exactly 4 minutes before being wired out to a holding firm in New Jersey called Gemini Logistics. Who is Gemini Logistics? I asked. Sullivan looked at me over the rim of his glasses. Gemini Logistics is a known front for the Russo crime family, he said. Specifically, their underground gambling operations. Ted Pearson isn't an entrepreneur, Conrad. He is a whale, a degenerate gambler, and a bad one at that. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together with the force of a collision. The desperation, the aggression, the rush to get me into a nursing home. It wasn't just greed, it was survival. Ted Pearson had gambled away money he didn't have to people who didn't accept IOUs. He was in deep with the mob, and when the sharks came circling, he didn't sell his own kidney. He offered up my son. Brandon isn't investing in a business, I realized aloud, my stomach churning. He is paying protection money. He stole $200,000 to keep his father-in-law from wearing concrete shoes. It gets worse, Sullivan said, tapping a key. I just pulled Ted's credit report and his civil court records. He owes another $300,000 to legitimate creditors. He has leveraged everything. His condo isn't just foreclosed on, Conrad. It is underwater. And here is the kicker. Brandon co-signed on a bridge loan for Ted 6 months ago. My son co-signed yes, which means if Ted doesn't pay, the sharks come for Brandon. And if Brandon can't pay, they come for my house, I finished, or they come for my life insurance. That was the timeline. That was the urgency. They needed me dead or incapacitated, not next year, but right now. The sharks were hungry. The timeline for my demise was being dictated by a mob boss's patience. This changes the battlefield, Sullivan said, leaning back. You are not fighting a greedy daughter-in-law anymore. You are fighting a desperate family, backed into a corner by organized crime. Desperate people are dangerous, Conrad. If they can't get the money from your accounts legally, they might try something more permanent. I thought about the flare gun in Damien's backpack, the planned trip to the mountains. Wait, wrong memory. I shook my head, clearing the fog. I thought about the pills, the switched medication, the way Monica looked at Beatrice with pure hatred. They are already trying, I said. They cut Beatrice's medication. They are trying to induce a medical crisis. We need to go on the offensive, Sullivan stated. We need to sever the link. No, I said, standing up and walking to the window. I looked down at the city. It looked cold and hard. We don't sever the link. We take ownership of it. What do you mean? Sullivan asked. Who holds the paper on Ted's legitimate debts? I asked. Not the mob debt, the bank debt, the foreclosure deficiency, the business loans. Sullivan checked the screen. A mix of mid-tier banks and a private equity firm called Horizon. They bought his bad debt for pennies on the dollar last month. They are preparing to sue him. Buy it, I said. Sullivan froze. You want to buy Ted Pearson's debt? I want to buy all of it, I said, turning back to him. I want to buy the judgment on his condo. I want to buy his business loans. I want to become the single entity that holds the leash around Ted Pearson's neck. Use the shadow corporations. Keep my name off the paperwork. I want Horizon to transfer the rights to us by tomorrow morning. And the mob debt, Sullivan asked quietly. You can't buy that, Conrad. No, I said, a cold smile touching my lips. But I can make sure Brandon can't pay it. I already froze the warehouse equity line. I flagged his credit cards. The well is dry, Sullivan. When the payment comes due next week and Brandon has empty pockets, Ted is going to have to answer to Mr. Russo. You are throwing them to the wolves, Sullivan observed, not critically, just stating a fact. I am the wolf, I corrected him. I am just letting them meet the rest of the pack. Sullivan nodded slowly. He understood. This was the nuclear option. By becoming Ted's primary creditor, I would have the legal right to seize everything he had left. His car, his clothes, his dignity. I could garnish his social security. I could evict him from any hole he tried to crawl into. Draw up the papers I ordered. Get the purchase agreements ready. I want to own Ted Pearson by noon tomorrow. And Sullivan. Yes, Conrad. Draft a new will. Revocable trust. Everything goes to the Beatrice Wolf Foundation for at-risk youth. Brandon gets nothing. Not a cent. Not a stick of furniture. And include a clause that if my death is found to be anything other than natural causes, any accident, any sudden illness, the trust immediately hires a private investigation firm to audit the circumstances. That is a fail-safe, Sullivan noted, writing it down. It removes the incentive to kill you. Exactly, I said. I want them to know that I am worth more to them alive and suffering than dead and buried. I finished my drink. The scotch burned a pleasant fire in my chest. I felt energized. For the first time in days, I wasn't reacting. I was dictating the terms of engagement. I am going back to the house, I said. Be careful, Conrad Sullivan warned. You are walking back into a cage with hungry animals. I picked up the folder of forged documents. I am not the one trapped in the cage, Sullivan. I am the zookeeper, and I just cut the feeding schedule. I left the office, my footsteps echoing on the marble floor. I had the legal hammer in my hand. Tomorrow I would buy the anvil, and then I would place my family between them and start swinging. The scale of the war had just expanded. It wasn't just about a house in the suburbs anymore. It was about debt crime and the brutal reality of consequences. I was going to teach my son a lesson about the real world. In the real world, when you borrow money from the devil, you don't pay him back with your father's soul. You pay with your own. The knock on the door came at 9 in the morning, and it was not a polite request for entry. It was the heavy, authoritative pounding of law enforcement. I was sitting in the kitchen finishing my coffee and reviewing the foreclosure documents I had just purchased from Horizon Equity. I did not jump. I did not panic. I simply folded the papers, placed them inside my jacket pocket, and walked to the door. I checked the monitor first. 2 uniformed officers and a woman in a gray suit holding a thick binder. Behind them, standing near the driveway like vultures waiting for a carcass, were Brandon and Monica. Monica was wiping tears from her eyes with a tissue. It was a performance worthy of Broadway. I opened the door. The cold wind rushed in, but the chill coming from the officer was colder. "Conrad Wolf?" the officer asked. His hand was resting near his holster, not drawing his weapon, but ready. "I am Conrad Wolf," I said, my voice steady and low. "How can I help you, officer? We have an emergency court order for a wellness check and a temporary detainment for psychiatric evaluation," the officer stated. "We have received sworn statements indicating you are armed, dangerous, and suffering from an acute episode of dementia. You are accused of holding family members hostage at gunpoint and endangering the life of your wife." I looked past him to the social worker. She was scanning the hallway, her eyes looking for signs of chaos. "Ma," I said, addressing her directly. "My name is Conrad. I am 71 years old. I am the owner of this property. I am fully lucid, and I am currently being targeted by a financial predator who happens to be married to my son." "He is doing it again," Monica screamed from the driveway. She ran forward, clinging to Brandon's arm. "He is paranoid. He thinks everyone is stealing from him. That is the dementia talking. Please, officer, you have to take him before he hurts Mom. He has a shotgun in the kitchen." The officer stepped forward. "Sir, do you have a firearm in the house?" "I do," I said. "I own a Remington 870. It is currently disassembled on my workbench in the garage where I was cleaning it. The firing pin is in a separate locked box. It is not a weapon right now. It is a collection of metal parts." "We need to see your wife," the social worker said, stepping forward. "Her name is Ms. Gantry, according to her badge." "She is upstairs sleeping," I said. "She has had a very difficult 48 hours. Because he abuses her," Monica shouted. "He locks her in rooms. He starves her." I stepped back and opened the door wide. "Come in," I said. "But only the officers and Ms. Gantry. Those two," I pointed at Brandon and Monica, "stay outside. I have a restraining order pending against them for elder abuse." The officer hesitated, then nodded. He motioned for Brandon and Monica to stay put. They looked furious, but they held their ground. I led the officials into the living room. It was spotless. I had spent the night cleaning, removing the traces of the Pearson infestation. I wanted the house to look like a sanctuary, not a crime scene. Ms. Gantry sat on the sofa. She opened her binder. "Mr. Wolf, I need to ask you some standard questions to assess your cognitive state. Do you know what year it is?" "It is 2024, I said. "It is Tuesday. The current president is in the White House, and the S&P 500 closed down 12 points yesterday." She blinked, marking something on her paper. "Can you count backward from 100 by sevens? 93, 86, 79, 72, 65. Shall I continue, or would you like to discuss why my son filed this report, exactly 24 hours after I discovered he forged my signature on a $200,000 loan application?" Ms. Gantry stopped writing. She looked up. "Forged your signature?" I pulled the folder from my jacket, the one I had bought from the bank. "Here is the affidavit from the bank manager," I said, sliding it across the coffee table. "Here is the copy of the check I wrote to cover his crime so he would not go to federal prison. And here is the transfer receipt showing the money went to his father-in-law's gambling debts." The officer leaned over to look at the documents. His posture shifted. He was no longer looking at a crazy old man. He was looking at a man who kept receipts. "This doesn't prove you aren't violent," Ms. Gantry said, though her voice was less certain. "Your son claims you threatened to kill them all yesterday morning. He has a statement here from a doctor, Aris, claiming you have been showing signs of aggressive Alzheimer's for months." I laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound. "Dr. Aris," I said. "You mean the Dr. Aris who lost his license to practice in Ohio 3 years ago for prescribing opioids to addicts for cash. The Dr. Aris who currently operates out of a strip mall clinic next to a vape shop." I have never met the man. If he diagnosed me, he did it telepathically. Ms. Gantry frowned. She flipped through her papers, looking at the medical report Brandon had submitted. "I want you to see something," I said, standing up. "Sit down, sir," the officer ordered, his hand twitching. "I am just going to the television," I said, moving slowly, keeping my hands visible. "I want to show you why my wife is really in danger." I connected my phone to the smart TV. I brought up the security footage from 3 days ago. The footage I had saved to the cloud, the footage that Monica didn't know existed. The video played in high-definition audio and video. It showed the kitchen. Beatrice was standing by the counter looking frail and terrified. Monica was looming over her, screaming, "Drink it, you stupid old woman!" Monica's voice shrieked from the speakers. Stop complaining about your heart. If you die, it just speeds up the process. We need the money. Brandon needs the money. Sign the paper or I swear I will put you in the basement and leave you there until you rot. On the screen, Monica grabbed Beatrice's arm and shoved her hard against the counter. Beatrice cried out, clutching her chest. I paused the video. The room was silent. Ms. Gantry was staring at the screen, her mouth slightly open. The officer looked sick. That is the woman standing in my driveway, I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. That is the woman who claims I am the abuser. She is projecting. She is desperate. And she is using you, the police and the social services, as a weapon to finish what she started. Ms. Gantry closed her binder. She stood up. Where is Mrs. Wolfe? She asked, her voice hard. Master bedroom. Top of the stairs. The door is locked with a biometric scanner. Only I can open it. I did that to keep her safe from them. Open it, Ms. Gantry said. I led them upstairs. I scanned my thumb. The deadbolt clicked. Beatrice was sitting in the armchair by the window reading a book. She looked up startled as the uniformed police entered. Conrad, she whispered. What is happening? Ms. Gantry walked over and sat on the ottoman in front of her. Mrs. Wolfe, my name is Patricia. I am a social worker. I need to ask you some questions. Do you feel safe here? Beatrice looked at me. I nodded, encouraging her. I feel safe with my husband, she said, her voice clear and firm. He is the only reason I am still alive. He came back. He saved me. Monica, she locked me out. She took my medicine. That was the nail in the coffin. Beatrice's testimony, combined with the video evidence and the financial fraud documents, shattered Brandon's narrative completely. We went back downstairs. I opened the front door. Brandon and Monica were waiting, smiles plastered on their faces, expecting to see me in handcuffs. Instead, Ms. Gantry walked out past me and stopped in front of them. Mr. Wolfe, Mrs. Wolfe, she said, her voice icy. You filed a false report. You presented forged medical documentation, and I have just viewed video evidence of elder abuse and assault. Brandon's smile vanished. What? No. He is manipulating you. He is crazy. Miss Gantry stepped into his personal space. If you call this department again without actionable proof of immediate danger, I will have you arrested for filing a false police report and wasting state resources. And I am opening an investigation into the welfare of Mrs. Wolfe based on your wife's actions. I suggest you get a lawyer. Monica turned purple. You can't do this. We are the victims here. The officer stepped forward, his hand now resting on his belt for a very different reason. I suggest you leave this property immediately, he said. Mr. Wolfe has established that he is lucid and in control of his home. You are trespassing. Brandon looked at me over the officer's shoulder. His eyes were wide with panic. The plan had failed. The legal assault had bounced off my armor. Dad, he whispered. Go, I said, mouthing the word. They retreated to their car, arguing violently as they got in. I closed the door and locked it. I leaned against the heavy wood and exhaled. I had won the battle, but the war was far from over. Ms. Gantry turned to me. Mr. Wolfe, she said, you are safe for now. But people like that, they don't stop. They are desperate, and desperate people are dangerous. You need to be vigilant. I know, I said. She left. I went back to the kitchen. I felt a sudden wave of exhaustion. I was fighting a war on 3 fronts: legal, financial, and physical. I poured myself a glass of water. Then I heard a thud from upstairs, a heavy, sickening thud. Beatrice. I dropped the glass. It shattered on the floor. I ran up the stairs, my heart hammering against my ribs, my breath coming in ragged gasps. "Beatrice," I shouted. I burst into the bedroom. She was lying on the floor next to the armchair. Her skin was gray. Her breathing was shallow and rattling. "Beatrice," I cried, falling to my knees beside her. I checked her pulse. It was erratic, thready. I grabbed the bottle of pills from the nightstand, the emergency supply I had retrieved from the garage. I looked at the label. Beta blockers. Then I looked closer. The seal on the bottle was broken. I had opened it yesterday. But the pills inside, they looked slightly different. The color was a shade lighter. I picked one up and crushed it between my fingers. It didn't crumble like medication. It turned to a chalky powder. Sugar pills, placebos. Someone had switched them. But how? I had the keys. I had the only access. Then I remembered. The locksmith. When I was in the garage getting the emergency kit yesterday, Brandon had been in the house alone for 10 minutes before the locksmith arrived. He must have found the emergency stash years ago and never told me. He had switched them before I even retrieved them. He hadn't just tried to get me arrested. He had set a time bomb in his mother's chest. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. "This is Conrad Wolf," I shouted into the receiver, my voice breaking. "My wife is having a cardiac event. I need an ambulance. Now." I looked at Beatrice's pale face. The rage I had felt before was nothing compared to this. This was not anger. This was a cold, black void. "If she dies," I whispered to the empty room, "if she dies, I will not just put you in prison, Brandon. I will burn your world to ash, and I will make you watch." The siren wailed in the distance, getting closer. The legal battle was over. The physical battle had just begun. And I was done playing defense. It was time to activate the Dragon Protocol. It was time to destroy them. The ambulance ride was a blur of flashing red lights and the rhythmic, terrifying beep of the heart monitor. I sat in the back, holding Beatrice's cold hand, my eyes fixed on the paramedic working to stabilize her. Every bump in the road felt like a physical blow. I was a man who had built skyscrapers, who had negotiated deals worth hundreds of millions, yet in that cramped metal box I was powerless. I could not buy her health. I could not negotiate with death. All I could do was watch the woman who had been my anchor for 40 years fade away because I had been too blind to see the vipers in my own nest. At the hospital, they wheeled her into the emergency cardiac unit. The doors swung shut, leaving me in the sterile fluorescent purgatory of the waiting room. I did not sit. I paced. My reflection in the glass partition was a stranger. The charcoal suit was rumpled. My eyes were dark hollows. I looked like a ghost haunting a graveyard. Hours passed. Time became a viscous, suffocating substance. Finally, a doctor emerged. Dr. Patel. He looked exhausted, his face grim as he pulled off his surgical mask. "Mr. Wolf," he said. I stopped pacing. "Is she alive?" "She is stable," Dr. Patel said. "But we need to talk." He led me into a small private consultation room. The air smelled of antiseptic and bad news. "Your wife suffered a severe hypertensive crisis," he explained, sitting down. "Her blood pressure spiked to levels that could have caused a massive stroke. We managed to bring it down, but Mr. Wolf, her condition is perplexing." Perplexing how I asked, my voice rasping. "We ran a full toxicology screen," Dr. Patel said, sliding a clipboard across the table. "Beatrice has a history of arrhythmia and hypertension, correct? She has been prescribed beta blockers for years." "Yes," I said. 50 milligrams twice a day. I gave her a dose myself yesterday." "That is the problem," Dr. Patel said, tapping the paper. "There are no beta blockers in her system. None. Not a trace. Based on the half-life of the medication, she hasn't taken a real pill in at least 3 weeks. Maybe a month." I stared at him. "That is impossible. I saw her take them." The doctor leaned forward, his expression hardening. We tested the residue in her stomach contents. It wasn't medication, Conrad. It was sugar, compressed lactose, placebos. The room spun. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. Placebos. Someone has been swapping her medication, Dr. Patel said. And that is not all. Her electrolyte levels are critically low. She is suffering from severe malnutrition, not just dehydration starvation. Mr. Wolf, when was the last time your wife ate a full meal? I thought about the locked pantry. I thought about the diet Monica had mentioned months ago, saying Beatrice needed to lose weight for her heart. I thought about Beatrice's thinning face, which I had attributed to aging. They weren't just neglecting her. They were killing her. Slowly, methodically, painfully. They had swapped her life-saving medication for sugar pills, letting her heart struggle and strain day after day while they watched. They had restricted her food, weakening her body so she would be too frail to fight back. It wasn't just about getting her into a nursing home. A nursing home costs money. A funeral is a one-time expense. They wanted her dead. They wanted my wife, the mother of my son, dead so they could sell my house and pay off a gambling debt. Thank you, doctor, I said, standing up. My legs felt like lead, but my mind was sharpening into a blade. Keep her safe. Do not let anyone visit. No one. I walked out of the hospital. The cold Chicago night hit me, but I didn't feel it. The rage that had been fueling me for days had vanished. Rage is hot. Rage is chaotic. What replaced it was something much worse. It was a cold, absolute void. A black hole where my mercy used to be. I drove back to the house. I didn't go inside to sleep. I went to the garage. I needed proof. I needed to know how deep the rot went. I began to tear apart the boxes Monica had labeled estate sale. I ripped open cartons of my books, my clothes, my life. I found it in a box marked bathroom mice. It was a receipt. A crumpled piece of paper from an online novelty store. Custom capsule filling kit, size 0. Lactose filler 1 kg. Dated 4 months ago. Shipped to Monica Pearson. And next to it, hidden inside an old coffee tin, I found the real pills, hundreds of them, dumped out of their prescription bottles and hoarded like trophies. She had been doing this for months. Every morning she would smile and hand Beatrice a pill that was nothing but sugar. And every morning she would watch my wife swallow it, knowing it was slowly stopping her heart. And Brandon. He lived in that house. He saw his mother wasting away. He saw her shaking. And he did nothing. He was either too stupid to notice or too cowardly to stop it. It didn't matter anymore. Negligence of this magnitude was indistinguishable from malice. I took the receipt and the tin of pills. I photographed them. I uploaded them to the secure server Sullivan and I used. Then I took out my phone and dialed Sullivan. It was 3 a.m. He answered on the first ring. Is she alive? He asked. She is, I said. But they tried to kill her, Sullivan. They swapped her meds for sugar pills. They starved her. It was attempted murder. There was a long silence on the line. I could hear Sullivan breathing. What do you want to do, Conrad? I walked out of the garage and looked up at the dark house. It loomed against the night sky, a monument to my life's work, now defiled by the people I had invited in. I am done teaching lessons, I said, my voice flat. I am done playing the concerned father. I want the Dragon Protocol. Sullivan exhaled sharp and quick. Conrad, that is the nuclear option. It is scorched earth. Once we pull that trigger, there is no coming back. You will strip them of everything. They will be destitute. They will be in prison. Brandon, he is your blood. I looked at the receipt in my hand. My blood is in the hospital fighting for its life because of him, I said. He made his choice. Now I am making mine. Execute it, Sullivan. Understood, Sullivan said, his tone shifting to professional steel. I will wake the judge. We will have the emergency freeze orders by dawn. I will contact the district attorney regarding the attempted murder charges. And the debt. Call it in, I said. All of it, Sullivan asked. Every cent, I said. The mortgage on Ted's house, the business loans, the personal guarantees. Foreclose on everything. Seize their bank accounts. Tow their cars. I want them waking up tomorrow as homeless as they tried to make me. And Brandon Sullivan asked. Revoke the trust, I said. Cancel his insurance. And Sullivan. Yes. Add a clause to the new will. If he attempts to contact me or Beatrice ever again, he forfeits the only thing I am leaving him, which is a single coin, I said, $1 silver. So he can call someone who cares. Because I don't. I hung up. I stood there in the driveway, the winter wind howling around me. I felt a strange sense of clarity. For 40 years, I had built a fortune to protect my family. I had insulated them from the harsh realities of the world. I had cushioned their falls. I had been the shield. But a shield protects you from enemies outside. It does nothing when the enemy is holding the handle. I went inside the house. It was silent. Empty. I walked into the kitchen and poured the tin of real pills onto the counter. I stared at them. Little blue circles of life that had been denied to the woman I loved. I wasn't going to sleep. I was going to wait. I sat in the armchair facing the door, the shotgun resting against my leg, the pile of evidence on the table. The sun would rise in a few hours, and when it did, I would bring the darkness down on my son's world so completely that he would never see the light again. The teacher was gone. The father was gone. Only the iron wolf remained, and he was hungry. Dawn broke over Chicago with a deceptive stillness. The sky was a bruised purple, slowly bleeding into a pale winter gray. I sat at the kitchen table, but the shotgun was gone. The cleaning kit was packed away. The pile of incriminating documents, the forged loan, the bank affidavits, the photos of the fake pills was locked in the safe in my study. The kitchen was clean. I had even swept the floor. I was not wearing my armor today. I had taken off the charcoal suit. Instead, I wore an old cardigan, one that Beatrice had knitted for me years ago. It was slightly unraveled at the hem. I had deliberately not shaved. I sat with my shoulders slumped, my hands wrapped around a mug of lukewarm tea, staring blankly at the wall. To catch a wolf, you use a trap. To catch a rat, you use cheese. But to catch a vulture, you have to play dead. I heard the front door open. They were cautious. Brandon and Monica were expecting the man who had threatened them with the IRS and the police just 24 hours ago. They were expecting the Iron Wolf. They crept into the hallway. Dad Brandon called out tentatively. I did not answer. I let out a long, shuddering sigh. They walked into the kitchen. When they saw me, they paused. They must have seen a broken old man, a man defeated by the sudden hospitalization of his wife, a man whose rage had burned itself out, leaving only ash. Conrad, Monica said, her voice sharp, testing the waters. We came to get some clothes. We are staying at a hotel. I looked up slowly. I made sure my eyes were wet. I made my hand tremble as I set the mug down. She almost died, I whispered. My voice was raspy, weak. Brandon took a step forward. Mom, is she... She is stable, I said. But the doctor said... He said it was stress. He said her heart couldn't take the fighting. He said I pushed her too hard. I buried my face in my hands. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, pretending to be weak in front of the people who had tried to murder my wife. But I needed them to believe it. I needed them to drop their guard. Monica stepped closer, the predator sensing weakness. We told you, Conrad, she said, her tone shifting from defensive to condescending. We told you that you couldn't handle it. We told you that living here alone was too much for both of you. You are too old. You are confused. And now look what happened. You almost killed her. I nodded slowly. You were right. The silence that followed that admission was absolute. Brandon looked at Monica. Monica's eyes widened. They had been fighting for months to get me to say those 3 words. I was right, she stammered. I looked at them. I let the fatigue wash over my face. I am tired, Brandon, I said. I have been fighting everyone. The tenants, the city, you. And for what? For a pile of bricks and a bank account. I sat in that hospital waiting room all night thinking about how I yelled at you yesterday. About the gun. About the police. I took a deep breath. I don't want to fight anymore, son. I don't want to be the Iron Wolf. I just want your mother to come home. I want peace. Oshamos. Brandon sat down opposite me. He looked wary, but hopeful. The greed was starting to flicker in his eyes, dampening his fear. What are you saying, Dad? I am saying that maybe it is time, I said. Maybe Dr. Aris was right. Maybe I am slipping. I forgot about the pills. I forgot to check on her eating. I was so obsessed with my business I neglected my wife. I reached across the table and took Brandon's hand. He flinched but didn't pull away. I want to retire, Brandon. For real this time. I want to sign it over. All of it. Monica's breath hitched. All of it, she asked. The commercial properties. The investment accounts. The house I listed. I just want to keep enough for a small condo in Florida for me and Beatrice. Somewhere warm. You too. You can have the empire. You can have the headaches. You can have the power. I saw the calculation happening behind their eyes. They were doing the math. The debt to the loan sharks was $200,000. My portfolio was worth $50 million. This was the jackpot. This was the solution to every problem they had ever created. And because they were narcissists, they believed it. They believed that I had finally broken. They believed that their gaslighting had worked. Are you serious? Brandon asked, his voice trembling with excitement. You would give me power of attorney, full transfer of assets. I corrected him. A living trust. You become the trustee immediately. You can sell the warehouse. You can pay off whatever debts you have. I know you have debts, Brandon. I know about the loan. He froze. It doesn't matter, I said, waving my hand dismissively. Just fix it. Take the money and fix it. I just want out. Monica put a hand on Brandon's shoulder, squeezing it. She was practically vibrating. We can help you, Conrad, she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. That is what family is for. We can take the burden off your shoulders. We will manage everything. You and Beatrice can just relax. Yes, I said. That sounds nice. We should do this quickly, she added. Before you change your mind. Or before, your health gets worse. I nodded. I already called Sullivan. I lied. He is drafting the papers. The irrevocable transfer of the Wolf estate. He wasn't happy about it, but I told him it was my decision. Sullivan is doing it, Brandon asked, surprised. He hates me. He works for me, I said, sharpening my tone just enough to sound like my old self before letting it fade back into weariness. And now he will work for you. He is preparing the documents. When can we sign? Monica asked. Tonight, I said. I don't want to drag this out. I want it done before Beatrice wakes up properly so I can tell her it is all handled. I booked a private room at the Gauge. 7 o'clock. The Gauge, one of the most expensive restaurants in Chicago. A place for celebrations. A place for victories. Why a restaurant? Brandon asked. Why not here? Because this house feels like a prison right now, I said, looking around. And because I want to do this properly. A passing of the torch. I want to buy you dinner, son. One last meal on me before you take over the check. Monica smiled. It was a shark's smile. That sounds lovely, Conrad. A celebration of new beginnings. Bring your parents, I added. Ted and Judy, Brandon asked. After yesterday. They are family, I said. And if they are going to be living in my house, or rather your house, they should be there. I want to apologize to Ted. I was harsh. I was stressed. Monica looked like she had just won the lottery. Not only was she getting the money, but she was getting the apology. She was getting the total submission of the man she hated. We will be there, she said. 7:00. They left the kitchen floating on a cloud of victory. They went upstairs to pack their things, not to leave but to move back into the master suite. I heard them laughing in the hallway. I heard Brandon say, "We did it, babe. We actually did it." I waited until I heard the front door close as they went out to pick up her parents and probably go shopping for outfits for the big night. I stood up. I straightened my back. The slouch vanished. The trembling hand became steady. I walked to the sink and poured the lukewarm tea down the drain. They had taken the bait. They had swallowed it whole, hook, line, and sinker. They thought they were walking into a coronation. They thought they were going to sign papers that would give them the keys to the kingdom. I walked to my study and unlocked the safe. I took out the real folder, the one Sullivan had prepared. It wasn't a transfer of assets. It was a compilation of felonies. I called Sullivan. "They are in," I said. "Is everything ready?" "The papers are drafted," Sullivan replied. "The foreclosure notices for Ted's properties are ready to be served. The DA has the warrant for Brandon's arrest pending your signal, and the private investigator has the cameras set up in the private dining room at the Gauge." "Good," I said. "Make sure the screen is Big Sullivan. I want them to see every detail of their ruin in high definition." Conrad Sullivan paused. "You are sure about this? You are going to destroy your son in front of a restaurant full of people." I looked at the photo of Beatrice on my desk. The photo taken before she started losing weight, before her eyes grew dim from poison. "He tried to kill my wife Sullivan," I said, my voice cold as the Chicago winter. "He doesn't get a dinner. He gets a show. And then he gets a cell." I hung up. I went upstairs to shower and shave. I needed to look my best. Tonight was not a surrender. It was an execution. And I would be wearing my best suit when I pulled the lever. I stood before the full-length mirror in the master bedroom adjusting the Windsor knot of my silk tie. It was a dark crimson, the color of dried blood. I had shaved closely, removing the stubble of the defeated old man I had played earlier that morning. I combed my silver hair back. I put on my cufflinks, heavy gold squares that Beatrice had given me for our 30th anniversary. I looked like the CEO I used to be, but tonight I would have to stoop. I would have to shuffle. I would have to dim the light in my eyes to make them believe the fire had gone out. I walked downstairs. The transformation of the house was already underway in their minds. Brandon and Monica had returned from their shopping spree laden with garment bags and shoeboxes. They were in the living room, and they had not wasted a single second. Monica was standing in the center of the room, holding a tape measure. She wasn't measuring for curtains. She was measuring my life for the dumpster. "We can knock out this wall," she said, gesturing to the partition between the dining room and the kitchen. "Open concept. It will add at least $50,000 to the asking price. And that chandelier, it has to go. It is hideous. It looks like something from a haunted house. That chandelier was hand-blown glass from Murano. Beatrice and I had bought it on our honeymoon." Brandon was sitting on the sofa, my sofa, with his feet up on the coffee table. He was scrolling through his phone, showing pictures of speedboats to Ted, who had arrived early, smelling of cheap cologne and desperation. "I was thinking a 30-footer, Brandon said, his voice thick with unearned confidence. "Something we can take out on the lake. We deserve a break, Ted, after all this stress." Ted laughed, a booming, wet sound. You deserve it, son. You stepped up. You did what had to be done. A man takes care of his family. I stood in the doorway watching them. They didn't even notice me. I was a ghost in my own castle. I cleared my throat, a dry, rattling sound I had perfected. They all turned. For a second I saw the fear flicker in Brandon's eyes, the instinctive reaction to seeing his father in a suit. But then he remembered. He remembered I was weak. He remembered I was giving up. Wow! Monica said, her voice dripping with condescension. Look at you, Conrad. You cleaned up nice. You almost look like your old self. I forced a weak smile. I wanted to look presentable, I said, my voice trembling slightly. For the signing, I want everything to be proper. Brandon stood up and walked over. He patted my shoulder. It felt like being touched by Judas. You look great, Dad, really. And don't worry about the house, we were just brainstorming. We want to make sure you get the best return on your investment so you can afford that condo in Florida. Florida, I repeated, pretending to be confused. Yes. The sun. It will be good for my bones. Monica rolled her eyes behind my back. I saw her reflection in the hallway mirror. She mouthed the word pathetic to her mother Judy, who was busy evaluating the thread count of my curtains. Sit down, Conrad, Judy said, patting the armchair. Rest. You need your energy for tonight. I sat. I became a piece of furniture. And because they thought I was furniture, they began to speak freely. They forgot I was there. Or perhaps they just didn't care anymore. They thought I was deaf or senile or both. Ted poured himself a drink from my crystal decanter. He didn't ask. He just took, so Brandon Ted lowered his voice, but not enough. How fast can we liquidate the warehouse? I have associates who are getting impatient. The interest is killing me. Brandon glanced at me, then back at Ted. As soon as he signs tonight, Brandon whispered, I already have a buyer lined up, a developer. They want the land. They are offering cash. We can close in 2 weeks. 2 weeks, I thought. My warehouse, my legacy, sold for scrap to pay off a bookie. And the house, Monica asked, joining the huddle. We list it next month, Brandon said. We need to clear out the junk first. Junk. My life. Beatrice's life. What about them? Judy asked, pointing a manicured nail in my direction. Where do they go while we stage the house? Brandon hesitated. I saw a flicker of conscience, just a spark, before Monica snuffed it out. There is a facility in Waukegan, Monica said. It is state-subsidized. It is not pretty, but it is secure. We can drop them off there temporarily. We tell them it is a spa or a resort. By the time they realize it is a nursing home, we will have power of attorney, and it won't matter. State-subsidized. Waukegan. They were planning to dump us in the cheapest hole they could find while they lived on my millions. I gripped the armrests of my chair so hard my knuckles turned white. I had to focus on my breathing. In. Out. Do not kill them. Not yet. The show hasn't started. I pretended to doze off. My head lolled forward. I let out a soft snore. He is asleep, Monica said, her voice full of disgust. God, he is useless. I can't believe we had to wait this long. He is tough, Ted said. I will give him that. The old wolf held on tight, but every wolf loses his teeth eventually. They laughed. They clinked glasses. They toasted to my toothlessness. I sat there, eyes closed, listening to them carve up my empire. They discussed the cars they would buy. Monica wanted a Range Rover. Judy wanted a facelift. Ted wanted to go to Vegas to double his money. They were vultures feasting on a carcass that wasn't even cold yet. I listened to Brandon, my son, the boy I had carried on my shoulders. I am just glad it is over, he said. I was worried he would find out about the loan. If he knew. He doesn't know anything, Monica assured him soothingly. He is gone, Brandon. The man he was is gone. Now he is just a signature. And tonight we get the ink. A signature. That is all I was to them. The clock chimed 6. Time to go. I opened my eyes. They jumped slightly. Did you have a nice nap? Conrad, Monica asked, smiling that shark smile. I dreamt, I said slowly, my voice thick. I dreamt of Beatrice. She was crying. Don't worry about her, Brandon said quickly. She is fine, Dad. The doctors are taking great care of her. And after tonight, you will have the resources to get her the best care in the world. Lies. Layers and layers of lies. The limousine arrived. Of course, they had ordered a limousine. On my credit card, no doubt. They wanted to arrive in style. They wanted the world to see them ascending to the throne. We walked out to the driveway. The air was frigid, but the sky was clear. The stars looked like diamonds on black velvet. I stopped at the bottom of the steps and looked back at the house. My house. The windows were dark except for the security lights. It looked like a fortress preparing for a siege. Come on, Conrad, Ted said, clapping me on the back. The chariot awaits. The Gage has the best steak in the city. I am going to order the Wagyu. I looked at Ted. I looked at his cheap suit and his greedy eyes. You should enjoy it, Ted, I said softly. It is a meal to remember. He didn't catch the double meaning. He just laughed and shoved me toward the open door of the limo. I climbed in. The interior smelled of new leather and champagne. They had already opened a bottle. They poured me a glass. I took it, but I didn't drink. I just held it, watching the bubbles rise and burst, just like their dreams were about to. The ride to the city was a blur of noise. They were loud, raucous. They played music. They took selfies. Monica put her arm around my shoulders for a photo, captioning it, "Family First." I sat in the corner, a silent observer. I was thinking about the folder in Sullivan's briefcase. I was thinking about the cameras hidden in the private dining room. I was thinking about the police officers who were currently drinking coffee in an unmarked van a block away from the restaurant, waiting for the call. We pulled up to the Gage. The valet opened the door. We stepped out onto Michigan Avenue. The city was alive with holiday lights. Tourists were walking by, bundled in coats, laughing, taking pictures. We entered the restaurant. The hostess greeted us by name. She looked at me with a flicker of recognition, but she was professional. Right this way, Mr. Wolf. Your private room is ready. We walked through the main dining room. It was packed. People turned to look at the procession. Ted was waving at strangers as if he were a celebrity. Brandon walked with his chest puffed out, holding Monica's hand. They felt powerful. They felt invincible. We reached the heavy oak doors of the private room. The hostess opened them. Inside, the table was set for a king. Crystal glasses, silver cutlery, white linens. And at the head of the table, a single large screen currently displaying a loop of a fireplace crackling warmly. Perfect, Monica whispered. It is perfect. Please sit, I said, gesturing to the table. I took my seat at the head of the table. To my right sat Brandon and Monica. To my left, Ted and Judy. The waiter arrived to take drink orders. They ordered expensive wines, appetizers, the most costly items on the menu. They didn't even look at the prices. Why would they? They weren't paying. I ordered an iced tea. So, Dad, Brandon said, leaning forward, his eyes shining with avarice. The papers. Did Sullivan send them? I reached into my inner jacket pocket. I felt the weight of the envelope. It wasn't the thick stack of transfer documents they were expecting. It was thin, precise. He sent them, I said. Can we see them? Monica asked, her hand twitching toward me. After dinner, I said. Let's eat first. I want to savor this." They were disappointed, but they acquiesced. They could wait an hour for $50 million. The appetizers arrived. Oysters, tartare, foie gras. They ate like starving animals. They talked over each other, planning renovations, planning vacations. They ignored me completely. I watched them. I watched Brandon laugh at Ted's jokes. I watched Monica whisper in Judy's ear. I watched them dehumanize me with every bite they took. They thought I was the past. They thought they were the future. But they forgot one thing. The past is where the debts are kept. And tonight, the bill collector had arrived. I checked my watch. Sullivan would be outside in 5 minutes. I tapped my spoon against my glass. The sharp, clear ring cut through their laughter. Silence fell. They looked at me expectantly. They thought I was going to make a speech about family and legacy. They thought I was going to bless them. "I am going to make a speech," I said, standing up. "But first I want to show you a little something. A retrospective. Since we are starting a new chapter, I thought we should look at how we got here." Monica smiled condescendingly. "Oh, Conrad, that is so sweet. Did you make a slideshow?" "Something like that," I said. I picked up the remote control for the screen. I pointed it at the digital fireplace. "Turn off the lights," I said to the waiter who was hovering in the corner. The room went dark, illuminated only by the glow of the screen. I looked at Brandon. His smile was faltering. He sensed something. A shift in the air pressure. A scent of ozone before the lightning strike. "Watch closely," I whispered. I pressed the button. The screen flickered to life, casting a harsh blue light over the table that made the expensive wine look like vinegar. They were expecting a montage of childhood memories, perhaps a photo of Brandon hitting his first baseball or graduating college. They were expecting nostalgia. Instead, what filled the 60-inch monitor was a PDF document scanned in high definition. It was ugly. It was bureaucratic. And to Ted Pearson, it was the face of the Reaper. It was a notice of default from Horizon Equity regarding a commercial property at 440 Industrial Way. Ted dropped his fork. It clattered against the fine china, a sound that rang like a gunshot in the silent room. He knew that address. It was the headquarters of his failing car dealership, the collateral for his mountains of debt. "What is this?" Ted stammered, his face flushing a deep, unhealthy red. "Where did you get this? This is private corporate data." I leaned back in my chair, interlacing my fingers. I did not look at the screen. I looked at Ted. "I got it from my filing cabinet, Ted," I said softly. "Because I own it." Let me take you back to 48 hours ago. While you were measuring my living room for new drapes, I was sitting in Sullivan's office doing what I do best, acquiring distressed assets. You see, Ted, in my world, when a company is bleeding, when it is drowning in red ink, the sharks circle. But sometimes a whale comes along and swallows the whole thing. I remembered the phone call vividly. Sullivan had the speakerphone on. We were talking to the risk manager at Horizon Equity, a man who sounded tired and desperate to offload a bad portfolio. Mr. Wolf Sullivan had said, his voice smooth as silk. "My client is willing to purchase the entire Pearson debt package, the primary mortgage, the secondary business loans, and the personal guarantees. All of it. We are asking 60 cents on the dollar," the risk manager had said. I had leaned forward toward the microphone. "I will give you 30 cents, I said. "Cash. Wire transfer today. Or you can spend the next 2 years chasing a bankrupt gambler through the courts while he hides assets in his daughter's name. Your choice." There was a long silence on the line. I knew what they were thinking. 30 cents was a loss, but it was a guaranteed loss. It was clean. It was over. "Done," the risk manager said. "I bought you, Ted. I bought your failures. I bought your bad decisions. I bought the lien on your house, the one you told Monica was just a paperwork error. I bought the judgment from that contractor you refused to pay 3 years ago." I pressed a button on the remote. The image on the screen changed. Now it was an assignment of debt document. It showed the transfer of rights from Horizon Equity to a holding company called Ironclad Holdings, LLC. Ironclad Holdings. Ted read, squinting. "Who is Ironclad I am?" I said, taking a sip of my iced tea. "It is a single-member LLC. I am the sole proprietor, which means effectively immediately I am your landlord. I am your bank, and I am your executioner." Judy let out a small whimper. She looked at Monica. "Monica, do something. He can't do this." Monica stood up, her hands shaking. "This is illegal, Conrad. You can't just buy people's debts to harass them. That is predatory lending. It is the free market, Monica," I corrected her. "Your father was a high-risk borrower. His creditors wanted out. I offered them an exit strategy. I didn't buy the debt to harass him. I bought it to secure my investment. You see, I knew my son had stolen $200,000 from me to pay off Ted's other debts. I figured if I was going to be funding the Pearson lifestyle, I might as well own the title." I clicked the remote again. The screen changed to a bank statement. It was Brandon's credit card statement, the one for the supplementary card I had given him, the one he had maxed out yesterday. $25,000. Porsche of downtown Chicago. Down payment. Brandon shrank in his seat. He looked like he wanted to slide under the table and disappear into the floorboards. "You bought a car, Brandon?" I asked, my voice deceptively light. "A Porsche 911. Beautiful machine. I thought I deserved it," Brandon whispered, "since we were taking over the business." I nodded. "Of course. A CEO needs a proper vehicle. But you see, there was a problem with the financing. The dealership called me this afternoon. They were confused. They ran the card and it went through, but then they got a call from the bank's fraud department." I leaned forward, staring into my son's eyes. "I told them the card was stolen," I said. Brandon's mouth opened. "Stolen, but you gave it to me." "I gave it to my son," I repeated the words I had said to the banker. "The man who used it to buy a sports car while his mother lay in a hospital bed starving and poisoned. I don't know that man. That man is a thief, and since the card is in my name and I did not authorize the purchase, the dealership has voided the sale. They are keeping the non-refundable deposit, by the way. My deposit, which I will be deducting from your inheritance." "Oh, wait. You don't have an inheritance anymore?" I clicked the remote again. This document was denser. Legal jargon. It was a foreclosure notice. But not for Ted's dealership. This one was for the condo Brandon and Monica had been living in before they were evicted. "You didn't know about this one, did you, Monica?" I asked, turning to her. "You thought you just missed a few rent payments, but you didn't read the fine print of your lease agreement, the one I co-signed years ago." I remembered signing that lease. I remembered thinking I was helping them get on their feet. But Sullivan had been smart. He had included a cross-default clause. If the guarantor's assets were seized, or if the guarantor withdrew support, the lease converted to a demand note. "I bought the building, Monica," I said. Her eyes bulged. "You what?" "The apartment complex," I said. "The owner was a client of mine back in the 90s. He was looking to sell. I made him an offer yesterday morning. I bought the building, which means I am your landlord. And since you are 3 months behind on rent and have caused significant damage to the unit, I am evicting you, not as your father-in-law, but as the property owner." I clicked the remote one last time. The screen went black. Then a single video file appeared. It was pause-framed. It showed a dimly lit room, a table, and piles of cash. Ted recognized it instantly. It was the back room of the warehouse where he played poker, where he lost the money that started this whole nightmare. "How?" Ted whispered. "How do you have that?" "I have resources, Ted," I said. "I hired a private investigator. A man who specializes in finding things people want hidden. He followed you. He recorded you. He knows about the loan sharks. He knows about Mr. Russo. I stood up and walked to the screen. I placed my hand on the image of the cash. You owe the mob $200,000, I said. My son stole that amount from me to pay them. But here's the funny part. The wire transfer Brandon sent. The one he forged my signature for, I looked at Brandon. I recalled the transfer, I said. Brandon gasped. You stopped it. I called the bank within the hour, I said. I flagged it as fraudulent. The funds were frozen before they hit the Cayman account. T&J Global Ventures never got the money, which means Gemini Logistics never got the money, which means Mr. Russo never got the money. Ted started to hyperventilate. He clutched his chest. You killed me, he wheezed. You killed me. If they don't get paid by midnight tonight. I checked my watch. It is 7:45, Ted, I said. You have 4 hours and 15 minutes, and you are sitting here eating foie gras. The room was silent, except for Ted's ragged breathing. They were trapped. I had cut off every escape route. I had bought their debts. I had seized their assets, and I had intercepted their lifeline to the criminal underworld. They were not just broke. They were owned. Why, Monica whispered, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. Why would you do this? We are family. Family, I asked, my voice rising for the first time. Family protects each other. Family does not swap heart medication for sugar. Family does not lock a 68-year-old woman on a balcony in freezing temperatures. Family does not plan to dump their parents in a state facility so they can buy boats and facelifts. I walked back to the head of the table. I offered you everything, I said. I gave you a home. I gave you money. I gave you love. And you looked at me and saw a carcass to be stripped. You wanted my power. You wanted my empire. I spread my arms encompassing the room, the documents, the evidence of their ruin. This is my empire. It is built on leverage. It is built on consequences. Welcome to the family business. I looked at Sullivan, who was standing by the door holding a briefcase. He stepped forward. Mr. Wolf has instructed me to execute the judgments immediately. Sullivan announced, his voice devoid of sympathy. The sheriff deputies are currently at your respective residences, the ones you still occupy, tagging assets for seizure. Your vehicles have been booted in the parking lot outside. Your bank accounts have been levied. You have zero access to funds. Brandon looked at me, his eyes filled with a terror I had never seen before. Dad, please, he begged. I will go to jail. If the loan sharks don't get Ted, they will come after me because I co-signed. You have to help me. I looked at my son. I saw the fear, and for a fleeting second I felt pity. But then I remembered Beatrice on the floor. I remembered the sugar pills. I am helping you, Brandon, I said. I am teaching you the most important lesson of your life. Actions have consequences. You wanted to be a big shot. You wanted to play with the adults. Well, this is how adults play. I picked up the linen napkin from my lap and folded it neatly on the table. Now, I said, about those transfer papers you wanted me to sign. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the envelope. I tossed it onto the center of the table. It landed among the half-eaten appetizers. Go ahead, I said. Open it. Monica grabbed it, her hands shaking so hard she tore the paper. She pulled out the document. Her eyes scanned it frantically, searching for the deed, for the trust, for the salvation. It is blank, she whispered. It is a blank sheet of paper. It is a clean slate, I said. That is what I am giving you. Nothing. You start from zero. Tonight. Right now. I turned to the waiter who had been standing in the shadows, terrified and fascinated. Check, please, I said. and add a 20% tip. I am afraid my guests won't be able to cover it. Their cards are all declined. I looked at Ted. You better run, Ted. Mr. Russo is not a patient man. Ted scrambled up, knocking his chair over. He didn't say a word. He just ran. Judy followed him screaming. Brandon and Monica sat there frozen. They had nowhere to go, no home, no money, no car. I walked past them. I put a hand on Brandon's shoulder. Do not come to the hospital, I whispered. If I see you there, I will have you arrested for the forgery. I paid the debt, but I kept the evidence. It is my insurance policy. Stay away from me. Stay away from your mother. I walked out of the private room into the bustling restaurant. The noise of happy diners washed over me. I felt light. I felt clean. Sullivan fell into step beside me. That was thorough, he said. It was necessary, I replied. We walked out onto Michigan Avenue. The wind was cold, but it felt good. It felt like cleansing. Is the car ready? I asked. Waiting at the curb, Sullivan said. Good. Take me to the hospital. I have a wife to wake up, and I have a new life to start. One without rats in the walls. I got into the car and didn't look back. The gauge glowed behind me, a warm golden box containing the wreckage of my son's life. I had destroyed him, yes, but I had saved myself. And sometimes in this cold, hard world, that is the only victory that matters. The waiter placed the heavy document on the white tablecloth right next to my iced tea. It was bound in blue legal paper, thick and official. This was it. The moment they had been salivating for. The irrevocable transfer of the Wolf estate. 50 years of sweat, blood, and sleepless nights reduced to a stack of paper waiting for a stroke of ink. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my fountain pen. It was a Mont Blanc, heavy and cold in my hand. I unscrewed the cap, slowly letting the suspense build. I could hear Monica's breathing. It was shallow, fast, and greedy. She was staring at the pen as if it were a magic wand that would turn her pumpkin life into a golden carriage. Brandon was gripping the edge of the table, his knuckles white. Even Ted had stopped eating his steak, a piece of gristle hanging from his fork suspended in midair. I lowered the pen to the paper. I let my hand tremble violently, feigning the weakness they so desperately wanted to see. I touched the nib to the signature line. A tiny dot of black ink bled into the paper. Sign it, Dad. Brandon whispered, his voice thick with urgency. Just sign it and you can rest. We will take care of everything. We will take care of Mom. I froze. I looked at the ink blot. Then I looked up. I looked at my son. I looked at the woman who had poisoned my wife. I looked at the man who had sold my son to the mob. Take care of her, I repeated softly. Like you took care of her medication. Like you took care of her diet. The trembling in my hand stopped instantly. I sat up straight. The fog in my eyes cleared, replaced by the cold, hard stare of the man who had crushed unions and hostile takeovers in the 80s. I don't think so, I said. I lifted the pen and threw it. It spun through the air, end over end, and landed in Monica's glass of champagne, splashing expensive liquid onto her silk dress. She shrieked, jumping up. What are you doing? You crazy old bat! I am not signing my life away, Monica, I said, my voice booming in the small room. I am signing your arrest warrants. I picked up the remote control again. The screen behind me, which had gone black after the financial devastation I had just unleashed, flickered back to life. But this wasn't a document. This was video. High-definition video with crystal-clear audio. It was footage from my living room taken 3 days ago. The angle was wide, capturing the kitchen island. Monica was standing there, holding her phone on speaker. Ted was on the other end, his voice booming through the device. We need him to sign, Ted said on the recording. Once he signs, we trespass him. We dump him and the old lady in that state facility in Waukegan. The one with the violations. It is cheap. We can pay for a year in advance and forget they exist. On the screen, Monica laughed. It was a cruel, ugly sound. Forget Waukegan, Dad. If we stop giving Beatrice her heart meds, nature will take its course in a week. Then Conrad will be so broken he will die of grief. It is cleaner. We get the life insurance that way too. The silence in the private dining room was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. Ted's face went gray. Monica looked like she was going to vomit. Brandon was staring at the screen, his mouth open in horror, not at the cruelty, but at the fact that he had been caught. The video ended. The screen went black. I looked at the partners of Ted Pearson, who were sitting at the far end of the table, men he had invited to witness his triumph. They were slowly backing away their chairs, scraping on the floor. They wanted no part of this. You planned to murder my wife, I said, my voice quiet and deadly. You planned to commit us to a facility and let us rot while you spent my money on boats and facelifts. You didn't just want my wealth. You wanted my erasure. That is out of context, Monica stammered, looking around wildly for an exit. That was a joke. We were blowing off steam. A joke, I asked. The doors to the private room burst open. Sullivan strode in. He was not alone. Behind him were 4 uniformed officers from the Chicago Police Department and 2 deputies from the sheriff's office. The room suddenly felt very small. Sullivan placed a heavy briefcase on the table. He opened it. Theodore Pearson, he announced, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. I have a writ of execution here for the immediate seizure of all personal and business assets to satisfy the judgment held by Ironclad Holdings. Your car outside is currently being towed. Your home is being padlocked as we speak. You are bankrupt. Ted slumped in his chair, clutching his chest. And Brandon Wolf Sullivan continued, turning to my son. I have a warrant for your arrest. Charges include felony forgery, bank fraud, and conspiracy to commit elder abuse. The officers moved in. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut was the loudest thing I had ever heard. Brandon offered no resistance. He looked at me, tears streaming down his face. Dad, please, he sobbed. I am your son. You can't let them take me. I stood up and walked over to him. I looked him in the eye. My son would never have forged my name, I said. My son would never have let his wife starve his mother. You are not my son, Brandon. You are a stranger who broke into my house. They pulled him away. Officer, I said, pointing at Monica. That woman there. She is the one who swapped the medication. I have the physical evidence, the fake pills, and the receipts in the safe. She attempted to murder Beatrice Wolf. Monica screamed as the female officer grabbed her arm. She fought, kicking and scratching like a feral cat. It was him, she shrieked, pointing at Brandon. He made me do it. He said we needed the money. He is the one who forged the signature. They dragged them out. The procession of greed and failure marched through the main dining room of the Gage. The restaurant patrons fell silent, watching as the woman in the silk dress and the man in the expensive suit were hauled away in steel bracelets. I watched them go. I felt nothing. No joy, no sadness. Just the hollow relief of a man who has finally cut out a tumor. Ted Pearson was still sitting at the table, shaking. He wasn't being arrested yet. His punishment was different. Mr. Wolf Sullivan said, looking at Ted, "Well, what about him?" I looked at the man who had corrupted my son, the man who had brought the rot into my family. Let him go, I said. Ted looked up, hope flaring in his eyes. Really? Yes, I said. You are free to go, Ted, but you have no car, you have no home, you have no bank accounts. And Mr. Russo, well, he is going to be very disappointed that his wire transfer never arrived. I imagine he will be looking for you. The color drained from Ted's face completely. I had stripped him of his protection. I was throwing him into the wild without a weapon. He ran. He didn't even grab his coat. He ran out of the restaurant into the freezing Chicago night, running toward a fate I didn't need to witness. I looked at the table. The expensive food was untouched. The wine was breathing in the decanters. It was a waste, but it was a necessary waste. I fixed my tie. I buttoned my jacket. "Sullivan," I said, "is the car ready?" "It is waiting, Conrad," he said. "Good. Take me to the hospital. My wife is waiting." I walked out of the restaurant. The wind off the lake hit me biting and clean. I took a deep breath. For the first time in months, the air didn't taste like betrayal. It tasted like freedom. I had destroyed my family to save it. It was a terrible price to pay. But as I got into the back of the car and watched the city lights blur past, I knew I would pay it again. I was the Iron Wolf, and my territory was finally clean. 6 months later, the sunrise over Biscayne Bay was not gray like Chicago. It was a painting of fire and gold, a violent burst of warmth that flooded the penthouse balcony. I sat in a wicker chair wearing a linen shirt and sunglasses. The charcoal suit was hanging in a closet 1,000 miles away. I didn't need armor here. I just needed sunscreen. Beatrice sat across from me. She was pouring Earl Grey tea from a porcelain pot. Her hands were steady. The tremors that had plagued her for months, the shaking caused by malnutrition and poison, were gone. Her cheeks had color. Her eyes were bright. She looked 10 years younger, not because of surgery, but because the weight of living with vipers had been lifted from her shoulders. We didn't talk much in the mornings anymore. We didn't need to. We communicated in the comfortable silence of two people who had survived a shipwreck and found a deserted island. The phone on the glass table buzzed. It was a jarring sound cutting through the cry of the seagulls. I looked at the screen. I knew who it was. It was Tuesday. He always called on Tuesdays. Cook County Department of Corrections. I looked at Beatrice. She stopped pouring the tea. She looked at the phone, then she looked at the horizon. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry. "Answer it," she said softly. "Put it on speaker." I tapped the green icon. The automated voice informed us that the call was from a correctional facility and was being recorded. Then there was a click. Dad Brandon's voice crackled through the speaker. It sounded thin, desperate. "Dad, are you there? Please pick up. I know you are there." Monica made a deal. She testified against me to get a reduced sentence. "She is lying, Dad. She says I planned it all. You have to help me. I need a new lawyer. The public defender is useless. I listened to my son. I listened to the man who had forged my name. The man who had let his wife starve his mother. He wasn't asking how we were. He wasn't apologizing. He was asking for money. He was still the same broken record, just playing in a different room. Dad, say something. Mom, please. I am your son." I looked at Beatrice. She leaned forward toward the phone. Her face was calm, serene even. It was the face of a woman who had finally learned her own worth. "You had a mother, Brandon," she said, her voice clear and unshakable. "You watched her die a little bit every day for 3 months. You watched her shake. You watched her starve. And you bought a Porsche." "Mom," Brandon sobbed. "You chose your family." "Brandon," she continued, "you chose Monica. You chose Ted. You chose the easy way. This is the hard way. Do not call this number again." She reached out and pressed the red button. The call ended. The silence returned, but it wasn't heavy. It was light. It was the silence of a closed door. Beatrice picked up her teacup and took a sip. She looked at me and smiled. "The tea is good today," she said. I smiled back. "It is perfect," I agreed. I picked up my phone and blocked the number. Then I opened my email. There was a message from Sullivan. The auction of the Pearson dealership had closed. The proceeds had covered the legal fees and a significant donation to the Elder Abuse Foundation I had started in Beatrice's name. Ted was currently working as a dishwasher in a diner in Gary, Indiana, hiding from the mob. Monica was serving 5 years. Brandon was serving 10. Justice wasn't pretty. It wasn't poetic. It was just math. They subtracted from my life, so I subtracted them from the equation. I looked out at the ocean. The Iron Wolf was retired, but he was sleeping with one eye open just in case. I took Beatrice's hand. Her skin was warm. "What do you want to do today?" I asked. She looked at the sun rising higher into the sky. "I want to live," she said. "Just live." And so we did. We drank our tea. We watched the boats. And we never spoke their names again. We spend our lives building fortresses to protect our children from the harshness of the world, never imagining that one day we might need protection from them. I learned the hard way that blood is merely biology, but loyalty is a choice. You cannot buy love and you cannot negotiate with greed. If you find yourself feeding a beast that only knows hunger and never gratitude, the only solution is to stop feeding it. Walking away from toxic family isn't a failure. It is an act of supreme self-respect. Peace is the only true wealth, and it is worth every penny of the price you have to pay to secure it. Do you think I was too harsh on my son, or did he get exactly what he deserved? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of justice served.